Hi everyone, I'm David Aragona, and welcome to the 2020 TimeformUS Derby Prep Series. This is something that's a little bit new for this year. You might remember in past years I covered all of these Derby preps in writing, doing a horse-by-horse analysis of all of these races on DRF.com, the TimeformUS blog. This year there's going to be a small written component as well where I highlight my plays in each of these races, but I thought it might be nice to do a video series this year of all of these races and highlight a lot of the major contenders using the TimeformUS PPs and taking a look at some of these horses in action in their prior races. So let's jump into the first of these Derby preps we'll be covering. It's the Grade 3 Lecomte on Saturday at the Fairgrounds, January 18th, and it's a pretty large 14-horse field that we're looking at here. Pretty competitive race. No real clear standout in this race, although the likely favorite is probably going to be the number 4 Scabbard. I haven't yet seen the morning line for this race, but I would imagine he'll be the favorite here, just given his general class edge over the rest of this field. But you've got a lot of contenders, horses coming up out of maiden and allowance wins, as well as some horses coming from other stakes races like the Kentucky Jockey Club at Churchill Downs. We'll talk about all of them, but let's begin by taking a look at that favorite's last race, the number 4 Scabbard, because he's coming out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, the championship race from last year at the end of back in the middle of the beginning of November. Scabbard's on the rail here, the number 5 horse towards the back of the pack, closing to be 4th at the end of this race. He was never really in the hunt to win, not one of Scabbard's best performances. We saw his best last year in the Iroquois when he was second to Dennis's Moment, who, due to a poor start, did not show up with his top effort in this Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Scabbard, though, he showed that he could get the 2 turns in that Iroquois. He probably didn't really handle the track in the Breeders' Cup. Don't want to be too hard on him for that race. He's just a horse that was really improving, getting a little bit faster with each start throughout 2019 last year. Don't think he's going to have any problem with the 1.16 distance or the pace scenario of this race. So he just seems like a logical contender, but given the large competitive nature of this field, I don't really want to settle for the horse that's going to be the likely favorite. Before we move on to the other contenders, let's talk about that pace situation and take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this race. And unsurprisingly, when you've got a field this large, the pace projector is predicting a fast pace. You see the number 13 Sycamore Run out on a clear lead over the number 11 Bango, who's also coming out of sprint races, and then a crush of horses in behind those that are all going to be jockeying for that stalking tactical position in behind the leaders. The horse, though, that is going to be on the lead in all likelihood as long as he breaks well is that number 13 Sycamore Lane. And let's take a look at his past performances in the TimeformUS PPs. He's coming off just a single career start. He won his debut at the Fairgrounds on December 21st, and he did it the right way. He won pretty easily that day by 3.5 lengths. He did it over a sloppy sealed track, though, and it seems like we're likely to get a fast track on Saturday at the Fairgrounds. So he is a horse that is going to have to prove that he can handle the dry surface. The 105 TimeformUS speed figure that he earned, though, that is the highest last out TimeformUS speed figure in this field. The problem is he did it going 6 furlongs. Now he's got to stretch out to 1.16 miles. Furthermore, if you watch that race, he was on his wrong lead for the entire stretch run, never switched over to his right lead throughout that straightaway. So I never like to see that with an inexperienced horse who's stepping up to get a real class test in his second start. He's got to improve, but I think he's a horse with ability, who's one that you have to respect just based on how well he ran first time out. Another horse that's pretty lightly raced that I like quite a bit more is the number 9 Silver State. And I think this is a horse that can take that step forward in just his 3rd career start. He's been in some real dogfights in his first 2 races. He dead heated for the victory in his debut at Churchill Downs 2 back in September. The horse that finished in a dead heat with him for the victory that day really had no excuse to lose that race. He got a good trip, whereas Silver State was off last, had to rush up through the field down the backstretch, continue to advance around the far turn in a race that was really dominated more towards the front end. I thought he was a really game to share the victory that day. Steve Asmussen stretched him out in his 2nd career start 2 months later, going the 1 mile, 1 turn distance at Churchill Downs. And he did lose that race by a nose, but the winner of that race, Necker Island, is a very promising horse for Stanley Huff, who it's really no disrespect to Silver State losing to that horse. And once again, Silver State showed a lot of professionalism, raiding in behind horses. He did break better that day, so that's a feather in his cap, even though he was squeezed at the start. He wasn't off as slowly as in his debut. But once they got into the stretch, he sort of bowled his way into the clear, took a good shot at the winner late, and just basically lost out on a close head bob. But I like what I saw from Silver State. don't think he's going to have a whole lot of trouble handling the 2-turn distance for the first time, because while his dam Supreme was primarily a sprinter, there's really a lot of stamina in the second generation of this female family. Supreme is by Belmont Stakes winner, Empire Maker, and the second dam rather, is actually a full sister to Kentucky Derby winner, Monarchos. So there is real classic bloodlines here, and I feel like Silver State is one that can take a step forward and beat this Lecomte field in just his third career start. While I like him, there are plenty of other horses to consider, and I want to briefly touch upon some of them. A horse like Finnick the Fierce, I think, is one that you have to take seriously, especially given the likely pace scenario of this race, because he's a closer in this field, and he's got that late closing style that should allow him to work out a good trip, especially from this rail draw. He'll be able to save some ground. The question with him is, can he repeat that Kentucky Jockey Club second place finish from last time? Because that's really the only race in his past performances that makes him remotely competitive. The 102 TimeformUS speed figure that he earned for that race seems pretty legitimate, because the winner of that race, Silver Prospector, had previously run very fast, though that's another race that was in the slop, so he's got to show that he can do it over a dry strip. But it was also his first race stretching out, and he seems like the kind of son of Dialed In that just has really improved with the added distance. So I'm not going to be shocked if he can get a big piece of this closing at the end of this race. Two more horses that I want to touch upon before we close out are Mr. Monomoy and Lynn's Map. Let's take first take a look at Mr. Monomoy, because these two faced each other in a December 21st allowance race last time at the fairgrounds, going the mile and 70 yards. Mr. Monomoy, I would assume, is going to be the one that will take more money in this race, because he's got those bloodlines where he's a half-brother to the champion Monomoy girl, so there's a lot expected of this horse. He was visually impressive when he broke his maiden 2-back at Churchill Downs, going the 6.5 furlong distance. Really wasn't beating the strongest field that day. He was 4-5 for a reason, and that 92 TimeformUS speed figure is not quite as fast as a lot of other horses in this race have been running. He did step up and improve marginally last time in that allowance second place finish to Lynn's Map, but he was once again a heavy favorite that day, and I didn't think he had a real excuse to lose that race, because you see those blue color-coded pace figures in the TimeformUS PPs indicating that that was a situation that favors horses towards the front end, and Mr. Monomoy was right on top of that pace. Seemed like he had the race won at the 16th pole and just got cut down late by Lynn's Map. And taking a look at Lynn's Map PPs, he's the one that I would want out of that race. Lynn's Map drew post number 14 in this race, and I was reading my colleague Marcus Hirsch's advance for this race, and it sounds like Lynn's Map might not run in this Lecomte, because Mark Cassius, trainer, is really not pleased with that post number 14. Rightly so, because it's difficult to break from that outside post position heading right into the first turn, going this mile and 16th at fairgrounds. I will say, though, if Lynn's Map does end up running in this race, I do think he's a major contender, because I like the way he finished last time, cutting down Mr. Monomoy at the end of that race. It's not like he was coming from that far back, but it's tough to make up even 2 lengths when a horse like Mr. Monomoy has such a pace advantage in that allowance race last time. And going 2-back to Lynn's Map's maiden win at Churchill Downs, going the 1 mile distance, I just really liked the way that he turned back multiple challenges, won that race by half a length, fighting horses off. If you watch this horse's stride, he's just got a really athletic way of moving. Seems like one that can use multiple types of running styles. Might be able to overcome this post number 14 if he runs in this race, though that sounds doubtful. So if I was going to make selections for this race, the ordinals I would go are 9, 14, 4, 1. That's the number 9 Silver State over Lynn's Map, then the favorite Scabbard, and Finnick the Fierce for a piece of this. But hoping to get somewhere around 4-1 or 9-2 on Silver State in such a competitive field. If Scabbard is a heavy favorite in this race, I think we could get a fair enough price on Silver State. So he would be my pick in the Lecomte on Saturday at the fairgrounds.